Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Grab a snack, get comfortable, and hit that subscribe button because today we're going to take a trip back in time. We're talking about New Year's Eve, not the boring sitting on the couch watching the ball drop kind of New Year's Eve. I'm talking about the kind of night that leaves your ears ringing, your heart pounding, and gives you a story you'll be telling for the rest of your life. We're heading back to the golden age of Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena, California. If you think you know the Rose Parade campouts of today, trust me, you have no idea. Let's get into it. If you go to Colorado Boulevard today on the day before the new year, you'll see a pretty active scene. It's the build-up to the world-famous Rose Parade. But let's be honest, the vibe today looks a lot more like a heavily managed, family-friendly campout. You've got strict street controls, barricades, heavy security, runners stretching on the sidewalks, and spectators bundled up in lawn chairs drinking hot cocoa. It's organized. It's safe. It's a parade night scene. But back in the day, Pasadena on New Year's Eve was the craziest, most unhinged party on planet Earth. It was less of a waiting for a parade vibe and more of a party hard, anything goes, survival of the fittest kind of night. The rules were mere suggestions, the streets belonged to the crowd, and the energy was absolute electricity. The night we decided to make it our destination, the chaos was at its absolute peak. It started like a lot of legendary nights do, with a whole lot of nothing. It was New Year's Eve around 8 o'clock p.m., and the four of us were hanging out in a stuffy living room staring at the walls. There was me, my friend Lucky, Greg, and Alan. We were trapped in that awful limbo of wanting to do something unforgettable but lacking the motivation to actually figure out what that was. The television was droning on in the background, showing generic countdowns from the East Coast, and the boredom was starting to feel suffocating. Suddenly, Greg sat up. He had this manic glint in his eye, the kind that usually meant trouble, adventure, or a little bit of both. "We're headed to Colorado Boulevard," he announced, his voice slicing through the lazy quiet of the room. Lucky and I immediately perked up, exchanging a look of instant approval. But Alan stiffened. You have to understand something about Alan. He was a great guy, but his heart belonged to one thing and one thing only: his car. It was a flawless, sunset orange Gran Torino that he treated better than most people treat their firstborn children. There wasn't a single dent, scratch, or smudge on that pristine paint job. He spent his weekends meticulously waxing it until you could use the hood as a shaving mirror. "Absolutely not," Alan said, shaking his head and crossing his arms. "Are you out of your mind? Do you know what happens on that parade route? It's a zoo. People are throwing things, falling over, leaning on cars. I am not taking my baby into that war zone." The tension in the room instantly spiked. We all knew that without Alan's car, we weren't going anywhere. Greg, however, was a master negotiator. He didn't push too hard at first. Instead, he started weaving a tapestry of what the night could be. He talked about the energy, the girls, the guys, the absolute once-in-a-lifetime madness of it all. To sweeten the deal, Greg pulled out a couple of beautifully rolled joints and promised Alan that he would personally act as a human shield for the car if things got too rough. It took a solid 45 minutes of pleading, bargaining, and the strategic deployment of Greg's stash, but eventually we watched the rigid posture melt out of Alan's shoulders. He let out a long, defeated sigh, tossed his keys in the air, and caught them. "Fine," Alan grumbled, "but if anyone so much as breathes on my passenger door, I'm leaving you all there." The living room exploded into cheers. Lucky and I sprinted to the bathroom to get ready. We didn't just want to go, we wanted to arrive. We got ourselves all dolled up, hair done, makeup perfect, picking out outfits that were the exact right mix of looking incredible and capable of surviving a minor riot. By 9:30 p.m., we were piling into Alan's immaculate car. The drive out there was pure magic. You know that feeling when you're young, the night is crisp, and the possibilities feel completely limitless. That was the vibe in the car. The windows were cracked, letting in the cool Southern California winter air. We were passing the joints around, the sweet, earthy smoke mingling with the scent of Alan's obsessive car fresheners. The stereo was blasting, and the drive was full of inside jokes, deep belly laughs, and a rising tide of anticipation. But as we got closer to Pasadena, the atmosphere outside the car began to shift. The quiet suburban streets gave way to heavier traffic. Then, as we approached the main arteries leading to Colorado Boulevard, the traffic stopped moving entirely. We had officially entered the fringe of the madness. Turning onto Colorado Boulevard was like driving into a completely different dimension. The street was a sea of headlights and taillights, packed tighter than a sardine can. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of other cars, all engaged in a relentless bumper-to-bumper crawl. The noise was deafening, a chaotic symphony of honking horns, blasting music competing from dozens of different stereos, police sirens wailing in the distance, and the roaring collective voice of thousands of people. The sidewalks were entirely swallowed by humanity. There was no concrete even visible, just bodies. And it was every kind of person you could possibly imagine all converging on this one stretch of asphalt for the night. There were families huddled around makeshift fire pits. There were aging hippies strumming out of tune acoustic guitars. There were straight people, gay people, college frat boys hanging out in truck beds, and older couples sitting in lawn chairs looking completely overwhelmed. There were drunk people swaying dangerously close to the traffic lanes, and high people staring wide-eyed at the neon signs. It was a beautiful, chaotic, swirling kaleidoscope of humanity. For a while, it was the most fun we'd ever had in traffic. We were rolling at about 1 mile per hour, and the windows were completely down. We were yelling out to the crowds, and they were yelling back. "Happy New Year!" someone would scream, holding up a plastic cup of beer. "Happy New Year!" Lucky and I would scream back, hanging halfway out the windows, the cold wind whipping our hair. People were tossing confetti, blowing noisemakers, and weaving through the stalled cars. It felt like the entire world was throwing a party, and we had front row seats. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, the tension began to mount. The crowd was growing larger, pressing tighter against the slow-moving procession of vehicles. The space between the cars and the massive throngs of people was shrinking. Alan was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. His eyes darted frantically from the rearview mirror to the side mirrors. "They're getting too close," Alan muttered, his voice tight with panic. Suddenly, a group of incredibly drunk guys stumbled off the curb. One of them tripped, his hand slamming down hard on the trunk of Alan's car to catch his balance. Thump! Alan slammed on the brakes. The car jerked to a halt. "Hey!" Alan screamed out the window, his face flushing red. "Watch the paint, man!" The guy just laughed, completely oblivious, and stumbled away into the crowd. Greg had to reach up from the back seat and massage Alan's shoulders. "Deep breaths, man. Deep breaths. We're almost to midnight. Just keep crawling." The claustrophobia was starting to set in. We were trapped in a metal box surrounded by a swelling, unpredictable mob. We couldn't go forward, we couldn't go backward, and we certainly couldn't pull over. Every time someone squeezed between our bumper and the car in front of us, you could hear Alan suck in his breath, terrified of a zipper scratching his hood or a belt buckle scraping his quarter panel. By 11:50 p.m., the gridlock was absolute. We were parked in the middle of Colorado Boulevard, and the engine was just idling. The energy on the street had shifted. It was no longer just a loud party. It was electric anticipation. You could feel the pressure building in the air, a collective holding of breath. Lucky looked at me, her eyes wide with excitement. "I can't be in here when it happens," she said. "Me neither," I agreed. At 11:58 p.m., the noise around us started to change. People were looking at their watches. Shouts were beginning to ripple down the boulevard, starting blocks away and rolling toward us like a wave. 10! Lucky and I grabbed the door handles. 9! What are you guys doing? Alan asked, his eyes wide. 8! We're going out, I yelled over the noise. 7! We popped the doors open. The blast of cold air and raw noise hit us like a physical force. 6! Close the doors! They're gonna get in! Alan shrieked. 5! Lucky and I didn't care. We hopped out into the narrow sliver of space between the car and the crowd. 4! Get on the hood! Lucky screamed at me. 3! Alan's worst nightmare was coming true, but in that moment, the rules of the car didn't matter. The rules of society didn't matter. 2! We scrambled up onto the hood of Alan's precious, immaculate, sunset orange car. I could hear him screaming from inside the cabin, but his voice was completely drowned out by the roaring of the masses. 1! Happy New Year! At exactly midnight, absolute pandemonium broke out. The sky seemed to shatter with noise. Horns blared continuously, fireworks crackled in the distance, and the screaming was deafening. But the craziest part wasn't the noise, it was the movement. The moment the clock struck 12, the invisible boundaries between the sidewalks and the streets completely vanished. The crowd surged forward, weaving through the stopped cars like water rushing through a broken dam. People were running everywhere. And then the kissing started. It's a tradition, a chaotic, unspoken rule of the boulevard. Random strangers, fueled by adrenaline, alcohol, and the magic of the new year, were sprinting past the cars. As they ran by, both girls and guys were grabbing whoever was closest. Because Lucky and I were sitting triumphantly on the hood of the car, we were prime targets. A guy in a leather jacket leaped up, grabbed my waist, planted a massive kiss on my cheek, yelled "Happy New Year!" and disappeared into the crowd. Before I could even register what happened, a girl with glitter all over her face grabbed Lucky by the shoulders, kissed her right on the lips, laughing hysterically, and kept running. It was insane. It was a frenzy of lips, laughter, flying confetti, and strangers hugging strangers. We were laughing so hard we could barely breathe, trying to keep our balance on the sleek metal of the hood while people streamed past us, grabbing our hands, blowing noisemakers in our faces, and showering us with the kind of pure, unadulterated joy you can only find in the middle of a massive crowd. I looked down through the windshield. Alan had his hands covering his face, resigning himself to his fate, while Greg was in the back seat laughing so hard there were tears streaming down his face. We stayed on that hood for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, soaking in the wild, pulsing heartbeat of Pasadena. There was no danger in that crowd that night, just a collective, overwhelming release of energy. We survived the night, and miraculously, when we finally crawled out of the traffic 2 hours later and pulled into a brightly lit gas station, Alan's car didn't have a single scratch on it. Greg truly was a wizard. It was, without a doubt, one of the greatest, craziest nights of my life. Man, just thinking about that night gets my heart racing. They really don't make parties like that anymore. But before I let you go, I want to take a quick second to get real with you. As fun as it is to look back on those crazy, chaotic nights, the most important part of that story is that we all made it home safe. If you are heading out to celebrate, whether it's New Year's Eve, a birthday, or just some random Saturday night, please look out for yourselves and each other. Never, ever drink and drive. Call a rideshare, pick a designated driver, or just crash on a buddy's couch. Stay aware of your surroundings, especially in massive crowds where things can get unpredictable. The best stories are the ones you're actually around to tell later. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have a crazy crowd story, drop it in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Stay safe out there, make good choices, and I'll see you in the next video.